the 7th of December 1941. 7:02 a.m. Opana Point, Oahu, Hawaii. Private Joseph Lockhart stares at the radar screen in disbelief. He's been on duty since 4 a.m. at the mobile radar station perched on the northern tip of the island. His shift is almost over. In a few minutes, he and Private George Elliott can shut down the equipment, pack up, and head back to base for breakfast. But something on the screen stops him cold. A massive blip, bigger than anything he's ever seen, and it's moving fast, heading straight toward Oahu from the north, 132 miles out. Lockhart leans forward. He checks the settings. No malfunction. The signal is real. "George, look at this," he says. Elliott moves closer. His eyes widen. That's huge. What is that? Lockhart doesn't know. But he knows it's not normal. He picks up the phone and calls the information center at Fort Shafter, the hub where all radar reports are processed. The line rings. And rings. Finally, someone picks up. It's Lieutenant Kermit Tyler, a young pursuit officer filling in at the center because most of the staff has gone to breakfast. Lockhart reports the contact. "We have a large flight of planes coming in from the north, distance 132 miles. Tyler listens. He pauses. And then he says the words that will haunt him for the rest of his life. "Don't worry about it." Lockhart tries to argue. The signal is too big, too fast. But Tyler cuts him off. "It's probably just our B-17 seconds coming in from California. They're due any minute." Lockhart hangs up. He and Elliott watch the blip move closer. 7:20 a.m. 7:30 a.m. 7:39 a.m. The planes are getting closer to the island. And then, at 7:55 a.m., the first bombs fall. Pearl Harbor, the heart of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, erupts in flames. By the time the smoke clears, 2,403 Americans are dead. 4 battleships are sunk. The United States is at war. And the question that haunts history is this: how did it happen? How did the most advanced military in the world get caught completely by surprise? The answer is simple and terrifying. The warnings were there. The technology worked. But no one was listening. Opana Point radar station wasn't supposed to change history. It was just one of 6 mobile SCR-270 radar units deployed around Oahu in late 1941 as part of the Army's new early warning system. Radar was cutting-edge technology. The Navy didn't trust it. The Army barely understood it. Most officers thought it was unreliable, prone to false readings, too experimental to depend on. But Private Joseph Lockhart believed in it. He was one of the few soldiers trained to operate the system. He knew how to read the oscilloscope, interpret the returns, distinguish between aircraft and interference. On the morning of December 7, Lockhart and Elliott were supposed to shut down the radar at 7 a.m. Their relief truck was late, so they kept the system running partly out of boredom, partly because Lockhart wanted to give Elliott more practice reading the scope. At 7:02 a.m., the blip appeared. It was huge, the largest return Lockhart had ever seen, at least 50 planes, maybe more. He called Fort Shafter, and Lieutenant Kermit Tyler made the decision that doomed Pearl Harbor. Tyler wasn't incompetent. He wasn't malicious. He was just inexperienced. He'd been assigned to the information center only a week earlier. He had no training in radar interpretation. And he knew that a flight of B-17 bombers was expected from the mainland that morning. So when Lockhart reported a large flight of aircraft approaching from the north, Tyler assumed it was the B-17 seconds. He was wrong. At 7:55 a.m., 183 Japanese aircraft fighters, dive bombers, torpedo planes swept over the island. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, leading the attack from his Nakajima B-5N bomber, looked down at Pearl Harbor and saw the U.S. Pacific Fleet lined up in perfect rows, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, all sitting ducks. He raised his hand and shouted into the radio, "Tora, Tora, Tora," the code word meaning tiger, confirming total surprise. And then the bombs started falling. Back at Opana Point, Lockhart and Elliot heard the explosions. They saw the smoke rising over Pearl Harbor, and they realized, with sickening clarity, what they had seen on the radar. They had detected the Japanese attack 53 minutes before it happened, and no one had believed them. The tragedy at Pearl Harbor wasn't just about one ignored radar warning. It was the culmination of months, years of intelligence failures, bureaucratic incompetence, and fatal assumptions. In Washington, U.S. intelligence agencies had been intercepting Japanese diplomatic communications for months. The Japanese were using a machine cipher called Purple, which American cryptanalysts had cracked in 1940. By late 1941, the signs were everywhere. Japan was preparing for war. On the 27th of November 1941, the War Department sent a warning to all Pacific commanders, including Admiral Husband Kimmel at Pearl Harbor and General Walter Short, the commander of Army forces in Hawaii. This dispatch is to be considered a war warning. Negotiations with Japan have ceased. An aggressive move by Japan is expected within the next few days. But the warning didn't say where Japan would strike. Washington assumed the targets would be the Philippines, Malaya, or the Dutch East Indies, not Hawaii. Why? Because Pearl Harbor seemed impossible. It was 4,000 miles from Japan, deep in the Pacific, heavily defended. Conventional wisdom said the Japanese couldn't pull off a surprise attack that far from home. Admiral Kimmel and General Short received the war warning, but without specific intelligence about Hawaii, they took only minimal precautions. Short ordered his planes grouped together on airfields to protect them from sabotage by Japanese sympathizers on the island. It never occurred to him that the real threat would come from the air. Kimmel kept his fleet in port. Sunday was a day off. Most sailors were ashore or sleeping. The ships were anchored in neat rows along Battleship Row easy targets. Meanwhile, Japanese naval intelligence had been meticulously tracking the movements of the US Pacific Fleet for months. They knew exactly where every ship would be on December 7. And on the 26th of November 1941, a Japanese carrier strike force, 6 aircraft carriers, 2 battleships, 3 cruisers, 9 destroyers, departed from Hitokapu Bay in the Kuril Islands and sailed east, maintaining total radio silence. American intelligence never detected them. On December 6, Washington decoded a 14-part Japanese message indicating that diplomatic relations were about to be severed. Army Chief of Staff George Marshall tried to send an urgent warning to Pearl Harbor, but the message was delayed. Atmospheric interference disrupted military radio, so the warning was sent by commercial telegram and didn't arrive until after the attack had already begun. Every system failed, every assumption was wrong, every warning was ignored or misunderstood, and the Japanese struck with surgical precision. The 7th of December, 1941, 7:55. A.M. Seaman, 2nd class. Leslie Vernon Short is eating breakfast aboard the USS Arizona. The 31,000-ton battleship is moored along Battleship Row, just off Ford Island. It's a beautiful Sunday morning, clear skies, calm water. Most of the crew is still asleep. A few sailors are topside, preparing for the 8 a.m. flag-raising ceremony. Short hears the sound of airplane engines. He looks up. Planes are diving out of the sun. For a moment, he thinks it's a drill. The Navy runs exercises all the time. But then he sees the red circles on the wings. Japanese. Before he can shout a warning, the first bombs hit. The USS Arizona shudders. Explosions rip through the deck. Flames erupt from the forward gun turrets. At 8:06 a.m., a 1,760-pound armor-piercing bomb dropped from a high-altitude bomber penetrates the Arizona's forward magazine, where more than 1 million pounds of gunpowder are stored. The explosion is cataclysmic. A fireball erupts 500 feet into the air. The Arizona's bow lifts out of the water and slams back down. The ship breaks in half and sinks in less than 9 minutes. 1,177 sailors and Marines die aboard the Arizona. Most never make it off the ship. Leslie Vernon Short is one of the few survivors. He's blown overboard by the blast. He swims through burning oil, choking on smoke, and makes it to Ford Island. He turns and looks back at the Arizona. All he sees is smoke and fire. Across the harbor, similar scenes of chaos and destruction are unfolding. The USS Oklahoma is hit by 5 torpedoes in rapid succession. The battleship rolls over and capsizes, trapping more than 400 men inside. The USS West Virginia takes 7 torpedoes and 2 bombs. It settles onto the harbor floor, partially submerged. The USS California is torpedoed and begins to sink slowly. The USS Nevada, the only battleship to get underway during the attack, is bombed and forced to beach itself to avoid blocking the harbor entrance. Japanese dive bombers and torpedo planes swarm over the naval base. They hit airfields, destroying planes on the ground. They strafe hangars, barracks, and docks. At Hickam Field, Army Air Corps planes are lined up wing-to-wing easy targets. Within minutes, most are destroyed. At Wheeler Field, pilots scramble to get into the air. A few manage to take off and engage the attackers. Second Lieutenant George Welch and Second Lieutenant Kenneth Taylor shoot down 7 Japanese planes between them. But it's not enough. The attack lasts less than 2 hours. By 10 a.m., it's over. The Japanese withdraw, leaving behind devastation. 2,403 Americans dead, 1,178 wounded. 4 battleships sunk, 4 more damaged. 188 aircraft destroyed. And one final chilling detail. Hours before the air attack began, the USS Ward, a destroyer on patrol outside Pearl Harbor, detected and sank a Japanese midget submarine trying to sneak into the harbor. The Ward's commander radioed the sighting to headquarters, but the report was dismissed as a false alarm. Another warning, ignored. So here's the question. Could Pearl Harbor have been prevented? The answer is yes and no. The warnings were there. The radar detected the attack. The submarine was sunk. The intelligence pointed to war. But human error, bureaucratic failure, and disbelief turned those warnings into nothing. Lieutenant Kermit Tyler thought it was B-17 seconds. Admiral Kimmel thought Japan would strike the Philippines. General Short thought the threat was sabotage, not air attack. They were all wrong, and 2,403 Americans paid the price. But here's the darker question. Were the warnings deliberately ignored? Was Pearl Harbor allowed to happen to bring America into the war? Conspiracy theories have swirled for decades. Some claim President Roosevelt knew about the attack in advance and let it happen to justify entering World War II. There's no evidence to support that. But the question lingers. What do you think? Was Pearl Harbor incompetence or something more? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you want the full story, how the Japanese planned the attack, the heroes who fought back, and the legacy of that day, subscribe now. Because this is just part 1 of 5. And the next chapter is even more shocking.